good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday. This is Seattle Now. The Enchantments are one of the crown jewels of Washington state. It's an incredibly popular destination for hikers and backpackers.
They just frame this truly beautiful chain of lakes. And the thing is, they're just outside of Leavenworth. It's a really easy place to get to, in a sense. You can theoretically do it in a day, wake up in Leavenworth or even in Seattle and be home for bedtime.
But a shortage of park rangers and overcrowding are making for some big challenges right now, and there are calls for emergency restrictions to limit access. In a minute, we'll talk with Seattle Times outdoors reporter Gregory Scruggs. But first, let's get you caught up. The results of Washington's August 5th primary will be official by the end of the week. County officials around the state meet today to start the process. Next, the Secretary of State's office has to officially certify the results in which the top two candidates move on in each race. The deadline for that is Friday. Governor Bob Ferguson is expected to respond today to a request that Washington state end its designation as a sanctuary jurisdiction. Last week, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi sent the governor's office a letter inquiring about the steps Washington will take to eliminate laws and policies that impede federal immigration enforcement efforts. Ferguson took to social media shortly after to say Washington will not change its values in the face of threats, but also promised a detailed response to Bondi's letter. And it's a big week for local fans of burger chain In-N-Out. Well, maybe super fans. In-N-Out is set to open its first Washington state location this Wednesday. You'll have to travel south about 2 hours, though, if you want to grab a double-double. The new location is in Ridgefield, which is near Vancouver. Check back for more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. The Enchantments are one of Washington state's most popular hiking destinations, but right now, the alpine wilderness area is far from the pristine escape visitors are hoping for. Bathroom pits are overflowing. There's garbage, and it's overcrowded. Right now, there's only one forest ranger to patrol more than 900 miles of terrain in the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest. The problems stem from federal budget cuts. Seattle Times outdoors reporter Gregory Scruggs took a trip to the Central Cascades, and he's here to tell us what he found. Gregory, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Tell me about some of the problems that are piling up there.
The Enchantments are a bucket list hike for people in our area and increasingly from across the country and across the world. Kolchak Lake in particular has gone viral on social media. It is a TikTok darling, racking up millions of views of this beautiful lake framed just so in the camera. And of course, what you don't see are the 500 other people that are probably just next to the person with the smartphone.
Come hike the Enchantments with me, part 2. Once we arrive at the beautiful Kolchak Lake, it's time to hike around the lake.
And
up
they're
the
seeing now
pass.
the most visitors they've ever seen in a day. I mean, they actually set a new record in July 4th weekend of over 2,000 hikers clocked in a single day.
Oh my gosh.
The wilderness management plan that was written way back in the 1980s, the official carrying capacity of the Enchantments is 60 people per day.
Oh, wow.
So we're in a very different situation than what land managers envisioned back when this was first set up as a managed wilderness area. And there is no restriction, right? I mean, if you're just going for the day and you're not camping, you're not spending the night, there are no limits on the number of people. The Forest Service has not set any permits or restrictions around that. So when you have thousands of people, and sadly not all of them practicing leave no trace principles, hauling out their garbage, that kind of thing, what we're increasingly finding is simply trash on the trails, right? And this is in the backcountry, so anything that gets left has to be picked up and hauled out by hand. There's been actually an increasing amount of graffiti, so there are even graffiti tags on rocks at the base of Asgard Pass, which is this challenging climb above Kolchak Lake. And then the one that, I guess is a bit unavoidable is the human waste. So there are 31 pit toilets stationed throughout the Enchantments. These are metal bins for you to relieve yourself. And when they're full, the Forest Service rangers are, if there are any around, put a cap on it, set it aside, and put in a new empty one. And at the end of the season, it actually is a helicopter mission to remove all of these pit toilets. And so when you're a hiker and you encounter and you need to go, nature's calling in nature, if you will, you find a toilet that's full, I can understand the impulse to not add to the already overflowing toilet and relieving yourself nearby in the woods. So, when I was up there just checking out one of these pit toilets, I counted over 24 what the locals like to call Charmin blossoms. Oh. So, this is toilet paper that, may or may not be strategically covering, somebody's number two, and somebody's got to clean it up.
As you've reported, there's only one forest ranger right now for this huge area. How did that happen?
Last year in September, still under the Biden administration, the Forest Service said we don't have any money to hire seasonal employees next year. And that would be the summer season is the peak season for a lot of these Forest Service areas, campgrounds, trails, and the like. So that already was a major red flag. We're going to be shorthanded. Then, when the Trump administration came in January, there were these mass firings across large swaths of the federal government, including the Forest Service. A lot of probationary employees were let go. Some were hired back or at least offered their jobs back, but not everybody took them back because there were fears of more permanent firings. And so the long story short is when you had 11 wilderness rangers employed last year covering the Enchantments and the other wilderness areas in that swath of the Cascades, only one is left with us this summer.
Gregory, that is a very striking image. Tell me more about what you saw when you were up there.
Sure. So I went on the classic hike, if you will, up to Kolchak Lake. And, in the first mile and a half, I actually didn't see very much garbage on the trail and was wondering if maybe the reports were overblown until I stumbled upon a volunteer who was actually cleaning up garbage. So that's why the stretch of trail was fairly neat and tidy. And when I encountered him, he was puzzling over what to do with a platter of cut fruit from Town and Country Market. One of those plastic round ones filled with pineapple and melon. And I guess it wasn't to that hiker's taste, so they just chucked the whole thing filled with the fruit in a creek. And he's there, he's going to spend the next 2 days cleaning up the Enchantments, and he's trying to figure out what to do with this giant party platter.
Wow. Okay. So these volunteers are doing this work up there. Park resources have been cut, and at the same time, the Enchantments are more crowded than ever.
There are some stopgap measures that the local outdoors community in the Wenatchee River Valley is taking, right? This is, from Leavenworth down to Wenatchee, a place that's as passionate about the outdoors as we are here in the Seattle area. And folks have stepped up as best they can. There's a new backcountry Enchantments stewardship volunteer. So that's the guy I encountered puzzling over the fruit tray, and they're cleaning up trash. They've actually done some trainings to learn how to dig those pit toilets I was talking about, and are just doing their best to backfill a little bit some of the job that the wilderness ranger, who I was told can only get up there about 2 days a week, because again, she's responsible for a huge chunk of terrain. And then the Leavenworth Chamber of Commerce has also posted paid and volunteer recreation ambassadors at the trailhead. So they're there to just kind of remind people you're in a wilderness area, you need to haul out your garbage. Sometimes they encounter hikers who don't seem prepared for what's ahead of them, especially if they've learned about it from social media. Maybe they've traveled from far away. Folks going up in flip-flops or not carrying enough or even any food and water. I definitely saw some of that on the trail.
You could look for the guy with the fruit tray.
There it is. And, they pick up trash at the trailheads. They remind people that they need to display a Northwest Forest Pass. I mean, they're doing the best they can as kind of substitute rangers. But everybody I spoke with made it clear they are by no means a replacement. And that what everybody I spoke to, whether an elected official, a volunteer, Republican, Democrat, across the political spectrum, they really just want to see a properly funded and staffed Forest Service.
Okay, well, in the immediate short term, among the ideas for how to deal with this problem are calls for emergency restrictions. Let's talk about that.
I spent some time with Chelan County Sheriff Mike Morrison. He actually flew our photojournalist up to the Enchantments in the sheriff's helicopter. I very selflessly turned down that offer so that my colleague with the camera could get the bird's eye view, and I went for the hike instead, and we met up at Kolchak Lake. And he's really frustrated over the number of search and rescue calls, especially of unprepared folks. There was a drowning in Kolchak Lake a few weeks ago, just days before I went up there, that his team had to fly in and retrieve the deceased body. There was another incident he told me about, a vehicle high-centered, so that's when you're driving up like a rough road and some rocks or something bash up your undercarriage, and the car started leaking fuel, like it ruptured the gas tank. So somebody just parked their car, it leaked gas out on the road, but they still went for their hike anyway. They just left the car there and sort of dealt with it later. this is a buildup, right? I mean, this is not like this is the first time there's been bad behavior in the Enchantments vicinity, but it's the sheer volume that's leading him to a bit of a breaking point. So he threatened to close a gate on the forest road that leads up to the trailhead, which if he did that would do two things. It would add another, I want to say 6+ miles round trip to the hike of just walking on a road. And there's basically no legal parking where this gate is. So, there would be room for a couple of cars, but it would severely cut down on the crowds, or at least there'd be a lot of illegally parked cars, which he and his staff could then ticket and potentially tow. So he wants to make it, not that it's closed per se, but that you're really going to have to want it. You're really going to have to be prepared and maybe cut down on some of the less prepared and more irresponsible behavior.
What's the response to that?
Well, a Chelan County spokesperson made it clear to me that the county, whether the sheriff or the county commissioners, they have no legal authority to take such an action on federal land. The sheriff told me, he would just do it anyway and sort of almost as a wake-up call and say, hey, feds, come do something about this.
Yeah.
And I think really what that threat really was driving home is that Chelan County has been asking the Forest Service to act for years now. So I reviewed documents, letters that were written by the Chelan County commissioners to, again, at the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest leadership level. So, this is the federal employees here in Washington State, headquartered in Wenatchee, responsible for this chunk of public land. Since August of 2023, have been asking them to do some kind of management, whether it's parking regulations, day use permits, timed entry. They actually had Chelan County's Public Works Department send some engineers up to go sketch out how you could do this. I mean, they dedicated some of
in the work,
their own staff time, and it was more than back of the napkin. I mean, I don't know, this wasn't by federal contracting standards. I'm sure there'd be more work to do. But what I saw was somebody, put some hours in, some serious, sketching out where you could put rebar in and signage. And I thought it was a very good faith effort to say, hey, we need some help here. This is having a big impact in our county. Can you do something? And the Forest Service has not acted. They just simply haven't done anything. There's been a lot of conversation, a lot of talk. There was this 4-year process called the Alpine Lakes Collaborative, a big roundtable to get recreation groups and land managers and tribes together, not just for the Enchantments, but all of the Alpine Lakes wilderness. Well, that dissolved in May with no concrete actions taken. Finally, in a Hail Mary pass, Chelan County and the recreation groups in the area, many of whom are volunteering this summer, issued an even more urgent letter to the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest in December after it was clear there wouldn't be seasonal employees coming in the summer of 2025, basically begging the National Forest to do something, anything, some kind of emergency measures, restrictions, some way of limiting the expected crush of hikers this summer. And there was no action taken. Then the administration changed hands. Staffing got even shorter, so that made it even less likely that there would be a management system put in place, and decision-making got harder. So my understanding from speaking with sources is that the folks in Wenatchee who, are responsible for this chunk of land, the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest, they have to take decisions up the chain to D.C. So it's even harder to do something like parking management, day use permits. Even if they had the staff, the decision-making is now a lot harder.
What has the Forest Service said, Greg?
I did get a spokesperson to respond to some queries, and it was pretty boilerplate stuff that, we have no plans to close the area, confirming that there is one wilderness ranger whose job includes, removing trash and cleaning up the pit toilets. They wouldn't get into any specifics around management plans for the area, but I did speak to a retired staffer from the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest who was actually responsible for recreation planning and management when she was there. So she was really clued into the Enchantments dialogue. And she told me that there was a plan of some kind to implement some sort of parking regulation this summer. But when that seasonal hiring freeze was announced back in September, the plan was shelved for 2025 because there was already a sense back then there just wouldn't be enough staff to implement and oversee something like that this year.
I cannot imagine the pressure that young worker has managing that land right now.
I reached out to her through my sources who do correspond with her directly. She did not get back to me. I'm not surprised. I don't think it's advised for federal employees to speak to the media if they haven't been authorized to do so. But, one story that was shared with me by someone familiar with her work is that she has actually wrestled some of these pit toilets by herself. So when they are full of, you know what, they're very heavy, 200 to 300 pounds. And you have to basically move them out of the way to put the empty metal canister, the next empty metal canister in. And it was described to me, she's basically done it like a leg press, where she's sat on the ground and she must have very strong quad muscles and has pushed with her feet these 200 plus pound metal tins filled with hikers' human waste out of the way so she can put the next empty one in, only so that they can get filled up again.
Give that person a raise. Is now the time to go to the Enchantments? I mean, what should people listening to this consider before taking this trip?
It's not for me to tell anybody not to go in a particular spot that's open to the public. I mean, there's no legal restriction on hiking there. I would certainly remind you, though, it's not going to be a wilderness experience in the classical sense of, it's not a place to go to find solitude these days. And I don't think that's been the case for a long time. So that might not be a secret to anybody. Obviously, always you should be practicing leave no trace, hauling out all of your garbage. But, we're at the point where even the traditional practices, like if you have to relieve yourself and there isn't a toilet, you dig what's known as a cat hole, certain distance away from water sources, from trails, from campgrounds, and, you can relieve yourself and then bury it. I would say folks should seriously think about bringing what's known as a wag bag or a blue bag if you've ever gone mountaineering, like climbing Rainier. There are places where you're expected to haul out your own waste. And I would suggest the responsible thing to do, at least this summer, is to plan on even taking that extreme of a measure if you're going to hike into the Enchantments.
Yeah, if you really care, now's the time to extra care, I guess, a little bit.
I think that's, unfortunately, more prudent than ever in this area. And of course, there are so many beautiful hikes in Washington. There are lots of lakes framed by alpine peaks. Kolchak Lake is not the only beautiful lake in the Cascades.
That's right. Washington State is a jewel. It's truly stunning, truly stunning. Gregory Scruggs, Seattle Times Outdoors reporter, really appreciate it. Thanks so much for coming in.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Thanks for listening to Seattle Now. Today's episode was produced by Andy Hurst. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, Vaughn Jones, Jenny Cecil Moore, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.